I think he's arrogant. I'll give it a D as in dumb, as in dud. I don't like him. I don't like the way he comes across. I don't like the way he treated Baker. I don't like the way he handled Shedeur. I think he thinks he's always the smartest guy in the building and in the locker room.
Arthur Blank is reportedly livid, and not just mildly irritated either. We're talking closed door, boiling point furious, because the coach he handpicked to guide the Atlanta Falcons into the future might already be trying to redraw the map. Kevin Stefanski hasn't even gotten fully comfortable in the building, yet reports suggest he's lobbying to bring in another quarterback, not to challenge Michael Pennix Jr., but to completely redirect the franchise's trajectory. And here's where it gets messy. Atlanta didn't bring Stefanski in to shred the existing blueprint, they brought him in to elevate it and build around it. So why does this suddenly feel like Cleveland all over again? This isn't some minor philosophical debate behind the scenes. This is ownership-level anger, and you won't believe how quickly it's escalating.
Kevin Stefanski is the new head coach. The two-time NFL Coach of the Year flew to Atlanta today. And now they're still on the Falcons head coaching job. Now, I read that he invited him over to his home for dinner.
They've officially locked in a deal to bring Kevin Stefanski in as the new head coach. The two-time NFL Coach of the Year even flew into Atlanta today to make it real. And just like that, the Falcons' head coaching search was wrapped up. I'm hearing Arthur Blank personally welcomed him into his home for dinner, which tells you this wasn't just business. Blank didn't pour years into rebuilding the Atlanta Falcons only to see the master plan questioned before week 1 even arrives. And yet somehow, this is exactly where things stand. Multiple reports say he's furious behind closed doors, not puzzled, not slightly uneasy, furious. Why? Because the very coach he entrusted with the franchise's future, Kevin Stefanski, is already advocating for a shift away from Michael Penn Jr. That's not some casual roster tweak. That's a full-blown philosophical earthquake, and you won't believe how fast it's shaken the foundation.
Straight to football, he wanted to get to know me
Really?
as a person, so that was really good.
And then the second meeting was like, let's talk ball?
Yeah.
Okay,
For
I love
sure.
it. Have you sat with him yet?
It was quick.
Yeah.
Real quick. He was in and out of the building. Obviously, he still has his family, back in Cleveland and stuff like that. So he's been trying to settle in.
Atlanta selected Penn to be the future, the face of the franchise, the foundation piece everything revolves around. You don't pull that trigger unless you're fully committed to constructing the entire system around him. But now, Stefanski reportedly wants another quarterback brought into the building, and not just some quiet veteran clipboard holder. This feels intentional. It feels like a shift in direction. And ownership hates curveballs, especially when they involve the quarterback position. Okay.
I'm going to get the easy ones.
How's it going for you, man?
Good. I'm drinking out of the fire hose, as you do as a new head coach. And a lot of this early in this process is putting a coaching staff together. So I feel very, very strongly about the group we've put together. We're almost done. I got one more hire to make, and then
Blank constructed this roster with purpose. Youth, explosive weapons, fresh energy, a clear culture. And now, the tension inside that building is undeniable, heavy, impossible to ignore. This isn't about play design or game management. This is about power. And when the owner and the head coach aren't in sync on the single most important position in football, that's how organizations fracture right down the middle. Let's take a breath and really unpack this. Stefanski reportedly isn't just calling for standard competition. Competition is expected. Competition is healthy. This feels like something else entirely. The whispers suggest he's eyeing a quarterback who could legitimately steer the franchise in a new direction. And that changes everything. Because the moment you even hint at moving off your young starter before he's had a real runway, you send a loud message to that locker room. So the question becomes simple and brutal. Do you truly believe in him or not?
He should have had to go back as a coordinator somewhere, and then if he got another chance, then sure, great. I would have rather had him keep Raheem and hire Stefanski as offensive coordinator. I hate to give it a D, but it's got to be a D just based on you're getting rid of a guy with a better record than the guy you're hiring.
Michael Penn Jr. hasn't even been given a real runway to prove who he can be, and already there's chatter about abandoning the original plan. That caught people inside the building off guard. Coaches expect unity at the top. Front offices expect patience with a young quarterback. Instead, this feels like instability creeping in way too early. And here's where it gets risky. Quarterbacks don't grow in confusion. They grow in clarity, structure, and belief. And without that foundation, you won't believe how fast things can unravel.
This publicly because it expresses some, amount of uncertainty to the fan base, but I think the reality of the situation is that they just don't know exactly. While they want to praise and be complimentary of all Pennix's tools, which are legitimate. They're not lying.
If Penn feels even a hint of hesitation from the top, that doubt won't stay quiet. It leaks. It spreads fast. The Falcons didn't bring Stefanski in to restart the entire project. They hired him to carry it forward, to sharpen what was already being built. So why does it suddenly feel like the ground beneath it is shifting? Because the second you even entertain replacing your franchise quarterback, even casually, you've already introduced a crack in the foundation. Now let's talk about the part nobody wants to ignore: Kevin Stefanski's quarterback track record. Over roughly 6 seasons in Cleveland, the Browns rotated through 13 different starting quarterbacks. 13! That's not long-term vision, that's scrambling to survive. Baker Mayfield, Jacoby Brissett, Deshaun Watson, Joe Flacco, and several others filled that carousel. And that level of turnover forces tough questions. Was it injuries, front office pressure, plain bad luck, or something deeper in the developmental process? Because when you cycle through that many passers, only 2 explanations really exist. Either the roster never had the right answer, or the system never fully empowered one. That's why what's unfolding in Atlanta feels bigger than a simple disagreement. This team is young, talented, built on upside and momentum. This isn't a franchise begging for a teardown. It's one asking for growth and patience. So when Stefanski reportedly leans toward bringing in another quarterback, fans immediately think back to Cleveland. They remember instability. They remember the constant resets and shifting narratives. And now the legacy question is forming in real time. Is this coach misunderstood, or are we watching a familiar pattern replay itself in a new city? Before this situation even boiled over, one prominent voice had already raised concerns: Cam Newton. Cam didn't dance around it. He didn't sugarcoat it. When Atlanta hired Stefanski, he openly questioned the fit, especially after what allegedly unfolded with Shedeur Sanders in Cleveland. His critique wasn't just tactical, it was philosophical. It centered on opportunity, belief, and who actually gets patience in this league. Cam argued that Shedeur never truly received a fair runway, that narratives formed early, and once skepticism trickles down from leadership, it becomes nearly impossible for a young quarterback to overcome it. And now, Atlanta supporters are sensing similar energy around Michael Pennix Jr. That's why Cam's earlier comments land differently today. At the time, some dismissed it as emotion. Now it feels almost prophetic. Mishandle one young quarterback and people question your evaluation process. Let it happen twice and it stops looking accidental. It starts looking like a pattern. And the Falcons simply cannot ignore that conversation. Not in this market, not with this level of talent, not at this pivotal moment. The Shedeur situation lingers like a shadow over the room. When Cleveland made its moves, critics insisted the issue wasn't talent. They argued it wasn't timing either. They said it came down to belief, or the lack of it. And once that narrative took hold, it spread quickly. Did Shedeur truly receive a fair opportunity, or was a label attached to him before he ever fully stepped into the spotlight? That's the real argument. And agree or disagree, perception is everything in the NFL, especially at quarterback. The moment a player is treated like a short-term option, growth slows down. The locker room picks up on it instantly. The fans feel it. The media magnifies it. Now apply that same lens to Atlanta. If Penn starts to feel like a bridge instead of the future, what signal does that send to him, to Drake London, to Kyle Pitts, to a young locker room built around progression? Quarterbacks require confidence from leadership, publicly, privately, consistently. If Shedeur became Exhibit A in a breakdown of developmental trust, the Falcons cannot allow Penn to turn into Exhibit B. Because once a young quarterback senses the organization wavering, careers don't just plateau, they unravel. This goes beyond playbooks. It's about identity. The Atlanta Falcons are shaping something youthful, explosive, culturally in sync with the city itself. Atlanta isn't passive, it's passionate, vocal, proud. It rallies behind its stars. Michael Penn Jr. symbolizes that next chapter. So do Drake London and Kyle Pitts. This core is designed to evolve together. So when a new head coach reportedly hints at hesitation around the quarterback, it collides with the vision ownership sold to the public. Arthur Blank didn't spend years rebuilding this team just to hit reset again. The philosophical disconnect is the real danger. Does Stefanski prefer a system-first quarterback he can fully control, or is he ready to tailor his scheme to the strengths of the player already drafted as the future? Because if the coach's blueprint clashes with the roster's identity, friction is unavoidable. And in the NFL, when ownership and head coach aren't aligned philosophically, it rarely fades quietly. Usually, someone exits. This is where things escalate. Arthur Blank has choices, and none of them are minor. He can step out front and declare Penn is the guy, period. That would send clarity through the entire building. It would establish a firm boundary. He could demand Stefanski focus on development over replacement. Or, if this gap widens, he could decide the coach doesn't align with the franchise's long-term direction. Because let's be clear, quarterback decisions shape entire eras. If Michael Penn Jr. flourishes, this tension becomes background noise, just another off-season storyline people forget. Winning erases drama in this league. But if he falters while instability surrounds him, that's not coincidence. That's organizational failure at the highest level, and everyone will recognize it. Quarterbacks don't mature in dysfunction. They grow in stability, structure, and belief. If skepticism lives behind closed doors, it eventually seeps into the locker room. Teammates detect it, veterans sense it immediately. And once belief in the quarterback wavers among leadership, fractures begin forming beneath the surface. Right now, that locker room is paying attention. The fan base is dissecting every whisper. The rest of the league is studying how Atlanta navigates this crossroads. Coaches need authority to implement their systems, but franchise quarterbacks demand visible commitment. When those two priorities collide, ownership decides which direction defines the future. Arthur Blank selected Penn to usher in the next era of the Atlanta Falcons. He didn't invest in youth only to second-guess it months later. This isn't about one training camp note. It's about whether the organization genuinely stands behind the path it chose. For Kevin Stefanski, this is legacy territory. Cleveland rotated quarterbacks without ever securing long-term stability. That turnover sparked questions about development and conviction. Was it flawed roster construction or a lack of sustained belief in one passer? Now, Atlanta becomes the proving ground for that debate. If Michael Penn Jr. thrives within a stable framework, Stefanski's narrative shifts overnight. He becomes the coach who corrected past instability. But if uncertainty lingers and another quarterback carousel begins, critics won't label it bad luck. They'll call it a pattern. And patterns stick to coaches longer than one losing season ever could. Penn represents more than upside. He represents patience. And young quarterbacks need time, clarity, and unwavering public support. The moment hesitation creeps in from leadership, confidence starts slipping fast. Development freezes. Momentum fades. The fallout doesn't always show up right away, but over time it stacks up and quietly redirects entire careers. Arthur Blank didn't overhaul the Atlanta Falcons just to drift back into chaos. He doubled down on youth, speed, and long-term potential. That blueprint revolved around drafting and nurturing a true franchise quarterback. Now the organization is staring at a crossroads that will define its future. Stand firmly behind the quarterback you chose or pivot toward the coach's alternative vision. There's no comfortable middle lane here. If Atlanta gets this wrong, it won't just mean one frustrating season. In this league, development windows slam shut quickly, confidence disappears, timelines restart. And when it comes to quarterbacks, those resets are brutally expensive. You won't believe how long the ripple effects can last.